Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. I know it's a Thursday today. I live. Sorry.
Looks like Thursday.
It looks like Thursday. Yeah, it's not easy to me these days to remember what day I'm living in, because this week I'm in Warsaw. Next week I will be in Madrid, and then I will travel to Medellin for a week, and then I will go to Lima for a week, and then one day in Bogota, 4 days in Panama, and then a week in Santiago de Chile, and then I will go 1 week to what's the next one? Aachen, Germany, and then from there to Bilbao, and from there to Estonia. And I'm flying in the middle of the weeks and in the weekends, and yeah, sometimes it's like, what day is today? Thursday. Oh, so this is Poland, right? So I have to mix my geography and my time schedule so I can have a sense of common sense, let's say. So thank you for being here on a Thursday in such an hour. I always say that the people that work for a whole week and then they leave work and they come to a meeting in order to exchange ideas about agility, about how to do things better, how to bring new ideas to companies, you are heroes. Most of the people, they just go to home and they sit on the couch and they see whatever they're showing on TV or in Netflix these days. So you are making an effort, and I want to thank you for that. And that's also the reason that I try to invest part of my time in doing meetups and meeting with the communities and with the Agile communities all around the world in the places where I'm going. I think that it's very, very important that we'll keep that spark and we light that fire. For instance, I've been working a lot in Colombia for the past 2 or 3 years, and I've managed to see a huge shift in the corporate culture in Colombia over the last 3 years, because 3 years ago they hosted the Latin American Agile Conference, and then there was a lot of people going there, and that was like a tipping point. And then also I saw how many people from big corporations starting not sending, but small groups of people from these big corporations were coming to the meetups, and they were like, in the back of the room, like, please nobody find out that I'm working on a bank, or something, because there were startups and people, small companies, and these people were always on the back, but they were, listening to these ideas and seeing, hey, these Solars guys, they seem like they're doing Scrum and Agile in big companies, in banking and insurance, so maybe it's possible after all. And then they brought those ideas to their companies, and that allowed that later on consultants and trainers and coach and evangelists, we started going to these companies. And in these days, we see that the main banks in Colombia are struggling and fighting to be more agile, and that means that also insurance companies are being influenced by that. And when you see the job postings in the websites, you see that they are hiring Scrum Masters, and they are hiring certified people, and they are looking for developers that know how to work on a Scrum environment. That's great. And communities, meetups, they had a lot to do in that shift in the culture. Everyone sees the shift on the culture when it happens. Wow, Colombia changed overnight. But nobody sees all the effort that people like you have been putting for a long time in order to make that happen. I always use the example of South Africa. One day people woke up and say, hey, let's end apartheid. And people were like, wow, all around the world, big news. South Africa changed overnight. And Nelson Mandela, who had been 40 years in jail, he was like, overnight my ass. I've been 40 years like banging my jar against the wall saying, yeah, apartheid. And everyone was like, oh my God, shut up. No. Okay, let's say apartheid. 40 years or 60 years, I don't know, a lot of fight. Everyone sees the change, nobody sees the effort. You are the guys doing the effort, and I want you to thank you for that. My name is Angel Medinilla. I come from Spain, especially right now. Yes, I come from Spain. Most of the time, I come from elsewhere, but I am from Spain. I have a previous life as a project manager in telco companies, big corporations. In 2007, I started my own consulting firm. It's called Projectalis because I thought that I was going to do consulting in project management, because that was what I was good at. And then over time, I realized that Projectalis was a very bad name, because I started seeing that nowadays, companies, especially companies that have products, especially companies that have services, especially companies that are concerned about their success in the market, where software is not just a commodity, but it's something that is actually producing value for the company. These companies are starting to realize that managing projects is not the whole story. When I was a project manager, everything was about delivering a set of features before a given deadline and below a given budget. If you were able to do that, you were a great project manager. If you have also like happy people and happy customers, that was a plus. But the whole thing was you have to deliver all the features, all the requirements, and you have to deliver them before the deadline and under the budget. And then we started seeing that, this is a real statistic, last year in the United States, 40% of the corporate software projects never saw the light of the day. Nobody used them, they never finished, they were killed, canceled, before they could be used or produce anything, nothing. So what's the point of delivering a lot of requirements before the deadline and under the budget if those requirements are never going to be used? 40%, I mean, the number it's outrageous. If tomorrow the car industry stopped selling 40% of the cars that they make, that will be World War III probably. That will end civilization as we know it. Really. I mean, if you stop the car industry, which is like the biggest engine for many industrial countries, they will probably go to war or something. But in software, we are like, 40%, that's not that bad. We had worse years. 40%, I can sign for that. We are used to lose this kind of efforts. Some of you will say, no, in my company, all the projects see the light. All the projects go live and we put them into production. And I would say, yeah, okay, 40% of the features you are putting into your products, nobody uses them. And we also see that, and I love it because every single time I say this, I see someone in the audience saying like, yep, I hear you. 40% of the features we are putting in a lot of projects, nobody uses them. Or 40% of the things we're doing at the end of the year, yes, we do them. Yes, people use them. But if we didn't do them, probably there wouldn't be much of a difference. And then we have to start thinking about, is it all about productivity and delivering everything and meeting the deadlines and staying under budget and having right estimates? And at the beginning, Scrum was sold as a project management method. And that's the reason that I also created my company and I call it Project Talis, because Scrum was a way to manage projects. But over time, I think that we are realizing that beyond Scrum, the important thing that we are trying to solve is, hey, we need more successful products. We need more successful companies. We need to have companies that have a better chance of survival in a new environment where we have competitors for all around the world. Like, for instance, in Spain, we had several software companies that were like struggling with each other, like in Bilbao, and they were working for the big banks there, like BBVA. And they were trying to sell projects to BBVA, but then now they have to struggle with companies like Solers coming from Poland or UST Global coming from the United States. Your competitor is not longer living in the other side of the street. Suddenly you have to be world class. And that's not only about managing projects and delivering things. That's also about having high-performing teams and having very, very good results. So yes, today we are talking about Scrum figures like the product owner and the Scrum Master. But beyond that, what we are trying to do in our companies, or what I'm trying to do in the companies I'm coaching, both in Europe, Latin America, several other places, it's to help them be more agile. Not because agile is the goal, but because we found that being agile is a good strategy for survival and for success in these days. When you are not sure about what product would be the most successful product that we can put into the market, when you are not sure if a given solution is the best solution for a problem, when you are not sure if your product is going to compete right with the other products in the market, then instead of following a plan for 5 years, putting something into production and then saying, oops, now it didn't work, let's try something else, it's much better to work in small cycles and be iterative and incremental, doing cycles of inspect and adapt, reflect and adapt, being empirical. And that's the reason we're doing Agile. We're not doing Agile because it's the new big thing or everyone is doing it or I don't know, it's what the developers want. We have to be aware of what's the problem we are trying to solve. And that's the first thing I always do when I arrive at a company. I ask them, what are you trying to solve? What's your problem? What's the goal of this transformation? And usually when I arrive at a big corporation and I say, what's your goal? They say, our goal is to develop an internal agile methodology. And I'm like, no, you're so wrong. We have to start all over again. Your goal is not to develop a methodology. Your goal is not to have a map of roles. Your goal is not to redesign the organization. Those are things that you might have to eventually do in order to solve your problems. But usually the problem is not to have an internal methodology. There's a lot of companies that have an internal agile methodology and they are not agile at all. I have some jokes and some examples that I've been using over time about how you can do cosmetic Scrum. Okay, cosmetic Scrum is when you put a layer of cosmetics on top of whatever you were doing before. You keep doing things the same, but you put post-it notes on the wall, and then you be the Scrum Master and you be the product owner, and all you people now you are called a cross-functional team, and now yay, we are Agile, we're doing Scrum. Still, you have a project manager, but now he's called a product owner. And this project manager, when a project starts, because you still have start dates, end dates, feature lists, budgets, and all this kind of stuff, project manager goes to his desk and he fires the tool that we all know that allows people to manage projects, which is Microsoft Projects, of course. And then he starts doing a Gantt chart. And then he starts looking for like tasks and dependencies, and then he starts putting like estimates, like 5 days, 10 days, 10 days, 5 days, and then that starts growing. And then when the Gantt chart is finished, he looks at the delivery date and he says December 2018, and he's like, no, this is not possible. 5 days, 3, 10 days, 7, 5 days, 2, 3, and then you start lowering the estimates, and then you see that the delivery date comes forward, and then it's January 2018, and now it's a good Gantt chart. And then you print it, but now you cannot bring a Gantt chart to the team. So instead of that, you take the column of the Gantt chart and you turn that into user stories. And now you have a backlog. And you're like, no, but that's not a product backlog. If your product backlog is describing tasks, then that's not a product. That's a list of things we have to do. Shut up. Now we have a product backlog. No, product owner, project manager. Oh, I mean product owner. You cannot bring requirements. You cannot bring tasks. You have to bring user stories. And then the project manager is like, what's a user story? Oh, a user story is something like, as a user, I want to have a print button so I can print things in the printer. And they're like, oh, so that's a user story. Yes, that's a user story. And he says, okay, here's your user story. As a project manager, I want all these requirements delivered by January 2018, so I don't cut your all heads off. And they are like, see, no, it wasn't that difficult. Now we have user stories. We are Agile. And so now you have a backlog because that person brings the backlog and says, this has to be done in a month's time. So now you have a sprint, which is a month, you have a backlog, you have an estimate, and you start working. And then the project manager is coming every day and is asking, is everything done? Are you done? What's the percentage of progress? I need a progress report. And we call that the daily Scrum, the daily meeting. And then once after a month, there's a ceremony where we bring the client and we show him whatever we're doing, and he says, what's this? This is bullshit. This is not what I asked for. I'm going to fire you all. And we call that the demo or the sprint review. And then we all go to a bar and we ask for gin tonics and beer and vodka, and we get super, super wasted, and we look at each other and we say, man, it sucks working here. And that's the retrospective. And now you have check. You're certified in Scrum because you're doing everything by the book. And what have you solved? Exactly, you are doing things exactly the same. And the problem is that when I talk about Scrum Masters, my personal experience is that there's a lot of misunderstanding on what's the Scrum Master role, and there's reasons for that. And people just find something that looks like what they understand as Scrum Master should be, and they say, you be the Scrum Master. Because when you go to literature, they say, oh, Scrum Master is it's a servant leader of the team. And you say, leader. Oh, we have team leaders. So, hey, team leader, you are the Scrum Master now. Because it's the thing that sounds more like Scrum Master. And for me, having a team leader, or a manager, or making that person the Scrum Master, it wouldn't be my understanding on what's the Scrum Master about. It's the same thing with leadership, okay? Several years ago, people like Jim Collins, they wrote a book called Good to Great. And they found that there were some companies that were doing astonishingly good in the market in several different industries. And then they studied those companies and they said, it's never about finance. They don't have more money than other companies. It's never about technology. They don't have like a better technology. It's never about, they say, the usual things you will, or to have a monopoly. Like for instance, Facebook. You had one guy on a dorm created a social network. That was not innovative. You had MySpace. He started doing the social network and he says, okay, let's code it in PHP. And everyone was like, no, yeah, I know PHP, so I'm going to do it in PHP. So now they have like their own flavor of PHP, which is not PHP anymore. Facebook's PHP, this case study for scaling PHP. Anyway, they didn't have better technology. They didn't have more money. They didn't have a more clever idea. They were innovative. Why Facebook won the war and MySpace lost it? What's the reason? And there are several other examples. And what these people found is that companies that were striving and that were soaring over the rest, they had specifically 3 things that made them different. Number one was they were investing in creating high-performing teams. These were not companies where people were told what to do. What they had is people that were very, very capable. They were very, very empowered. And you could bring problems to those people. I need you to fix this problem. And then just let them alone and get anything out of the way. And then these teams were like steamrollers. They were like juggernauts. They were capable of fixing anything you put in front of them because they were like highly motivated. They were very skilled. They were collaborating. And companies like Apple and Google, they invested a lot in understanding what creates a great team. Like for instance, Google, they have a blog that is called Rework. And the subtitle is In the Search of a Perfect Team. And what they are doing is they are putting a lot of money in researching what makes a team great. And they say it's never about skills. It's never about experience. It's never about background. We have found no correlation in college marks, like your grades in college or in school. There's no correlation between marks and the performance of the teams. What are we finding? These teams are great when they have good communication, when they care about each other, when they are vulnerable, when they help themselves, when they learn from each other, when they are good at solving conflicts. Instead of hiding conflicts and avoiding conflicts, these people are willing to enter constructively and positively into solving these kind of problems. Well, this is one of the things that we've known for 30 years that creates amazing companies. You go to Lego, you see high-performing teams. You go to Google, to Facebook, you see high-performing teams. You go to IKEA, you see high-performing teams. You go to IDEO, which is a design company, which is also very successful. You see high-performing teams. You don't see one guy, which is the wise guy, telling everyone what to do, and then mindless drones following orders. That's good for manufacturing, maybe, if you have industry. But if you are creating products, if you're solving problems, if you have to be creative, if you have to be successful, then having high-performing teams is way better. One of the difference of the companies that are soaring over the others. Then the second difference is these companies, they continuously learn, adapt, they continuously improve. They don't stay the same. They are constantly asking, what are we doing wrong? How can we fix that? And if you've been in a big corporation these days, they don't sound like the kind of companies that are constantly reinventing, learning, and improving. They are like really, really fixed mindset, and it's very difficult to move them. Like as I told you, I've been working with a lot of Latin American companies, and they have a very specific culture. German companies had different cultures. Scandinavian companies, different culture. Let's not talk about Spanish culture. But in Latin America, something that happens is that they are very traditional, they are very hierarchical, and they follow the process. The word that they pronounce the most after one day is process. Process, process, process. And one day I was at the bank, and this is a true story, and I say, you have a team hired of people like an outsourcing company that is helping your bank to develop and in turn a mobile application? And they were like, yes. I was like, is this important for you? And they were like, this is strategical. We think that in few years' time, 80% of the transactions are going to be made through mobile devices. So the mobile application is strategical for the bank. And I was like, okay, are you aware that the team that is designing this strategical application, it's only capable of doing anything because they are using the Starbucks coffee Wi-Fi network? They couldn't access the bank Wi-Fi. because the process didn't allow people from outside of the bank to use the internal Wi-Fi. So they said, okay, screw it. And they were using the Wi-Fi of the Starbucks in the corner of the bank. And I was saying, if Starbucks decides to close that bar, we are fucked. There's no mobile application because these guys cannot like download frameworks or update the application or synchronize in their version control system. And then they were like, yeah, but you have to understand that there's a process. And I was like, okay, can we talk to the person that wrote that process and try to find out if there's any way we can rewrite the process? And people looked at me like I was an alien. And I was like, okay, let's rephrase the question. Is the person that wrote the process alive? Because maybe that process was written like 20 or 30 years ago. This person died in his home, like old age, surrounded by his beloved people. But the process is still there, and nobody knows how to change it. No? So again, if your company is not able to change, if your company is not able to learn, if you see that you're doing something wrong, and you do it over and over and over, well, that's the definition for insanity. Albert Einstein said that insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over and over and having different results. So you have to try new things, and you have to be able to change. And if everything has to be changed by the CEO, then changes are very, very slow. You have to push the ability to change things to the production line. Like for instance in Toyota, in the Toyota production system, lean manufacturing, what they did is they realized that if you have someone at the end of the line trying to see the quality of the cars, when the cars were coming out of the factory and the quality was very low, it was too late to fix the quality. Most of the time they were like, oh my God, the paint has scratches, but if I say, no, this car is wrong, then we have to redo everything again. So let's like polish it a little bit, no pun intended by the polish thing, and then let's ship the, I don't know how it happens, but every single time I'm speaking English in Poland, I manage to use the word Polish in a different sense, sorry. Anyway, polishing the painting, and then they were shipping cars with low quality, and they said, no, the only way we can have better quality cars if the person that is in the painting booth is the one responsible to see the painting, and if there are scratches in the painting, they can stop the production line and say, why on earth there are cars coming out of the painting booth with scratches in the painting? That's not normal, that's not good quality. And then we fix the scratches, but then we also find what's the reason that the painting is no good. And then sometimes they were like, oh, it's because the painting booth is dirty. Why is dirty? Oh, it's because the air filters are dirty. Maybe we should change the air filters more frequently. Oh, but that costs money. Yes, but was the cost of shipping bad quality. And then they started doing something they call built-in quality. Like every single workstation in the process in the production line is responsible for the quality of the workstation. And the principle was never push bad quality down the line. Okay, and that was the 70s and the 80s and the 90s in people that knew nothing about software. They were doing industrial things. And then these days I go to software companies, and what do I have? Developers and testers. Yay! And who's responsible for quality? Testers, because they are from the QA department. And what's the responsibility of developers? They have to ship everything. They have to make sure that everything gets delivered by Friday. So what they do twice the crap, twice as fast. And that's the current definition of agility for many companies. Being agile is shipping twice the crap, twice as fast. No, sorry, I mean, it's also wrong. We were trying to create an amazing company. Amazing company, high-performing teams, ability to continuously improve. We're doing something wrong, let's fix that. I mean, even in Colombia, there's a government order, there's a government law that prevents testers and developers in the banks for using the same environments. And you're like, excuse me? I mean, it's even close to the Colombian constitution. I'm like, what the freak? That exists. Please search for it. It's a circular, I don't know the number. And they were like, yeah, because they thought that it was too risky to have the same people working in the same environments. And then the banks, they even push it further, and they decided to split the testers and the developers in separate locations because it was too dangerous that the developer and the tester were working together, because then they, I don't know, they could scheme with each other and say, I will do something evil, and I will say, yeah, it's okay. So basically they believe that if a software developer and a tester, they cross themselves in an escalator, they have to shoot each other or something. I don't know. They have to fight to death. Death by trial, I don't know, just by trial. Anyway, companies that are soaring above the others, they are learning and changing and improving constantly and as close to the customer as possible. Instead of trying to fix the air conditioning, which is nice, we try to fix whatever we are doing that is preventing our customer to be super happy. And then the third thing that Jim Collins found that made companies amazingly successful, high-performing teams, learning and changing and improving, and then they said amazing cultures. And these amazing cultures were represented by amazing leaders. They said these companies, when we visit these companies, we don't see bosses. We don't see people that are inspiring fear into people. We still use fear as a management tool in the 21st century. It's a shame. There's a lot of people that live in fear that they will be fired, in fear that they will fail, in fear that they will be responsible for something bad, in fear of being scolded in front of everyone, of being ridiculed. And you know, we're spending 1/3 of the best years of our lives at work. And it's too much of a burden to live in fear. If you've seen this movie, Blade Runner, Roger Howard was playing Roy Batty, the next success, and there was this sentence where he said, it's quite an experience to live in fear. That's what it means to be enslaved. If you live in fear, you are enslaved. And a lot of companies, there's a lot of fear, and the fear always comes from middle management. Always. Sometimes there's fear from a colleague, but that's more manageable. Usually, top management, they are like in the stars, and they are so above the production lines that you don't have like this kind of fear from the CEO or the vice president. But middle management, according to my experience, middle management is like the resonating point of the culture in the company. People will behave in the ways that middle managers are encouraging. People will behave the same way they see middle managers behave, and they will do the things that will keep middle managers happy. You know, you have a CEO saying, our most important goal is to have happy customers. And you are like, yeah, and we have to have happy employees, perfect. But then you have your middle manager saying, it's not done. Are you leaving home? You're leaving home and it's not done? That's what you're doing today? And who are you going to follow? Your vice president saying, I want to be happy, I want to go home, I want to see my kids. My kids are starting to call me Uncle Daddy because they don't see me anymore. But then you have your middle manager, which is your boss, which is the person which is hiring you and is responsible of your salary. And that person, every single time you wake up at 7, he's looking at his watch and looking at you and putting like, you're not committed enough. And you end up doing long hours in order to keep your boss, your middle management happy. And that becomes a cultural thing. And it didn't came from the CEO or the vice president. It came from middle management. So for me, there's several ways to change the culture of a company, but always we have to work with middle managers, because if you don't do that, there's no way you can change a culture. And a culture, it's defined by principles, for values, and a mission. I will talk a little bit about that, and I will come back to the Scrum Master, I promise. Culture, great cultures. You go to Google and people visit Google offices. People queue in a line in order to visit the offices of Google and see the offices. Zappos, maybe you know about this company. There's this amazing book called Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh, who was the CEO of Zappos. The first time I heard about Zappos, I read it was a company that was selling shoes online. And I was like, shoes online? What a stupid idea. I want to test my shoes before I buy them. And the next thing I read was that they were selling $8,000 million gross merchandise sales every year. And I was like, that's the reason I'll never be a millionaire. I cannot spot a good idea when I see it. Yes, they were bought by Amazon, because Amazon saw Zappos culture and they say, I think we can learn a thing or two about this from these guys. And they bought Zappos. And they're bringing a lot of the things that Zappos are doing to Amazon. And Zappos have the principal offices in Las Vegas. And there's people paying $200 for touring the Zappos offices, which is an office. There's software developers, people taking calls, and people are paying $200 to see that. And you're like, excuse me? You know, it happens to me all the time. Yes?
I did.
You did. Did you pay for it?
It was cheaper.
It was cheaper these days. No, it's like the culture book. They were shipping culture books for free, and at some given moment they say, you know what, $10, because they were doing like thousands of culture books. The culture book in Zappos, it's every single year they ask the people at Zappos, what does it mean to you to work at Zappos? Tell a story about one day of work and tell how that represents your experience in working in Zappos. And everyone in the company participates. And then they compile all these stories in a book. And when you enter Zappos, they say, welcome to Zappos. This is 2016's book of our culture as written by your colleagues. Read it. And then you read stories by your colleagues of what does it mean to work in Zappos. A lot of companies, they're saying, oh, we are going to have our culture book. But of course, we are not going to allow our employees to write in the culture book. It's going to be written by human resources. Because we don't trust our employees to write the culture book. Maybe they write bad things when they were drunk in the Christmas party or something. We don't want that. We want a culture of discipline and commitment. And then you have a human resource department that is writing the culture book. And of course, you are doing it wrong. You are trying to be like Zappos and you're doing something else. Because you see the book and you don't see the process that they followed in order to create this book. So again, the culture is amazing. And when you see amazing cultures, you spot cultural leaders. And the problem is that Jim Collins started talking about these leaders, and these leaders were people that encouraged the others to improve, encouraged the others to be happy and motivated and to find ways to create high-performing teams and to have happier customers and to have better products. And these people were like inspiring. And in the same sense that Lao Tzu said that the leader is best when his presence is not noticed. When the work is done and the task is achieved, people will say, we did it ourselves. That's the definition of leader that I use most of the time. I use an anthropological definition of leadership. In a tribe of apes, the leader is not a boss. He's not telling people, he's not telling the other monkeys or the other apes to, you go get some fruit, you go fight the tiger, you go bring the females. No, they are basically sitting there doing nothing. But they keep the tribe together. And then if two apes start fighting, the leader will step in and will send them to different places because we have to be together. And if there's some kind of quarrel in the company, in the tribe, they will be there. And of course, when the tribe has to fight a predator, like a tiger or something like that, the leader will be there. But it's not his responsibility alone to fight the tiger. That's leadership in a human perspective. If you think about leaders in the sense of people that inspire you, and you are like, oh, I'm super inspired by the Dalai Lama, for instance. Who appointed the Dalai Lama as your leader? I'm like, no, that's my choice. That's my decision. I've met several characters in my life, and I haven't met the Dalai Lama, but when I found this person and I studied this person, I was like, wow, I feel super inspired by this person. You choose your leaders. Instead, our companies are imposing leadership and saying, this be your leader. And you're like, this one? Really? This was the best thing available? Yes, that's your leader. Love him. And when we read Jim Collins and we found out that having leaders was better than having bosses, a lot of companies, they basically ran a corporate macro in Microsoft Word, and they said, search and replace manager with leader. And they say, hey, Bob, what? You're not the warehouse manager anymore. Now you're the warehouse leader. And he's like, what's a warehouse leader? I'm like, I don't know. It's like a warehouse manager's, but better, on steroids. It's like it's more motivating for people if we call you leader instead of manager. And again, it's like with Scrum. You have a project manager and you call him the product owner. Or you have a customer, a client, and you say, you be the product owner. And then we keep complaining that the customer, product owner, is not doing the product owner job, and is not playing the role, and is not writing user stories, and is not coming to the meetings, and have not set of priorities, and is not keeping the workload to the capacity of the team, and is not helping the team to understand what's the problem to be solved, and is not helping us understand who's the market, who's the customer, is not building user personas, and it's not keeping the information of the project. And I'm like, yes, because you don't have a product owner. You just put a tag on your customer and you're like, yeah, you be the product owner. What we have been seeing brilliantly, by the way, in the previous talk is there's a lot of work to be done in order to transform your customer or your client or someone in the client organization in a real product owner. It's not only a matter of having a badge that says product owner. But of course the role is super beautiful. Owner of the product. I will be the owner of the product. Okay, come to the meetings. I'm too busy. I want to own the product, but I don't want to do the actual work. Okay, that doesn't happen with many other roles in the companies, but with product owners it's very, very regular. So again, 3 things that are making companies amazingly successful. High-performing teams, ability to learn and adapt and improve, and great cultures, which mean great leaders. And leader doesn't mean that it's your boss. There's many kind of leaders in companies. Like for instance, there's usually a technical leader, not by appointment, but that person in your team, in your area, in your department, that when we are facing a very, very hairy, difficult problem, we all look at this person like, what would you do? And we'll say, I would use this and this and this. And then we follow his advice because he earned it. We all follow that person for technical advice because he had demonstrated over and over and over that he's taking good decisions and he's helping others and teaching others. And then that's a technical leader, even if he doesn't say so in his business card. Every company, on the other hand, has a party leader. You want to throw a party? You all know who's the person. You're like, yeah, I know who's the party leader in my company. There's always a party leader. And I always try to find that person and befriend him immediately. It's a good thing to have that person on your side. Because you say, we are having Scrum training, it's like, oh, well, we're having a Scrum party with the party leader. Everyone's, yay! Everyone's coming. And we have beer. Oh, fantastic. Beer-driven development and beer-driven transformation. It's a good idea. I use it a lot. Anyway, leaders are everywhere. And leaders are the people that take steps forward. And leaders become leaders when people decide to follow those leaders. So leadership is not about managers and bosses. What does all this have to do with the role of the Scrum Master? Well, the Scrum Master is responsible for creating high-performing teams, having learning organizations, and having great cultures. That's the responsibility of the Scrum Master. If you have a Scrum Master that is more concerned on, are we going to deliver the 10 committed features on Friday, probably you are doing it wrong, according to my view on who's a Scrum Master. That's product owner talk. I usually say that product owners are like the defenders of the team against the forces of the company, okay? You have several people in the company that are like conflicting forces. Marketing wants marketing tools, finance wants finance tools, purchases want purchases tools, sales wants sales tools, and the development team is, okay, shall I do something for marketing, for sales, for finance, for purchasing? And all these people in these departments are saying, for me, at the same time. That's what I call the problem of orcs at the gates. You have a brave group of hobbits that are trying to find an army of orcs. And the orcs are more powerful. So what can you do? You can go to Helm's Deep, where you have thick walls and a very thin, narrow entrance. And the orcs are not very intelligent. They try to go in the entrance one by one, and then we can fight them. And that's a product owner. Product owner is Helm's Deep. Is the only entrance of work to the team. Is the person that will deal with the orcs and we'll try to figure out what's the most important, valuable thing that we can do in the next iteration, in the next increment. That's why I say that it's very important that the product owners speak the language of Mordor. They have to speak the language of business. They have to speak deadlines and budgets and value and customers and strategy and competitors and metrics. If you have a product owner that cannot do that, sometimes you take a business analyst, because some people are like, oh, product owner, person that writes user stories. User stories, requirements. Who writes the requirements here? The business analyst. The business analyst is going to be the product owner. Does the business analyst speak the language of Mordor? Because maybe don't. If you don't know how to negotiate, if you don't know how to say no to a vice president, you have to learn how to do that. You know how to say no to a vice president? You don't say no, because that's like super unpolite and risky. You're going to get fired. But when a vice president says, I want this by Monday, you say, oh, I'd love to. I would definitely love to have that by Monday. Translation, no, it's not gonna you're not going to have that on Monday. So again, product owner is someone that needs to speak the language of the business. If you have a Scrum Master speaking the language of Mordor, something is wrong. Because, you know, everyone in the company is concerned with the short term. That's a human thing. That's human brain. I mean, we have a problem. The problem is that we were hunter-gatherers. So we were really, really concerned with the next food, the next meal, and trying to kill the next animal or find the next vegetable. And it was very, very, thinking about retirement when we were hunter-gatherers made no sense, because probably tomorrow you are going to be killed by a tiger or something. So who will think about saving or retirement in the ages that we were hunter-gatherers? But then suddenly in the last few years, which is 300,000 years in evolutionary terms is few years, we became a civilization with software developers. But the brain hadn't noticed. The brain hadn't noticed that we are not hunter-gatherers anymore, and is super concerned on the short term. And that's the reason that you always favor immediate satisfaction versus delayed gratification. You earn some money, and you're like, I could buy a motorbike, or I could save for retirement. Let's see how many motorbikes there are in the market. Oh, this one is cool. Because that's immediate. If you spend the money now in a motorbike, you will get instant satisfaction. If you save money for the future, that's delayed gratification. That's difficult. That's the reason that diets never work. I know a lot about dieting, unfortunately. Diets never work because you have to take constantly the decision of, should I take this donut now, or should I look good on a swimsuit on August next year? And I'm like, who's this August next year Angel that you're talking about? I'm September's Angel, and I'm hungry, and I'm going to eat the donut. And in August, there will be another person looking at the past saying, I damn you, I curse you, September's Angel. You feasted on donuts, now it's me, the one that has to go to the beach and look terrible in a swimsuit. That's some other person's problem, even if it's you in the future. We are very, very bad at projecting to the future and being sensible to long-term decisions. So in companies, we tend to favor very, very short-term decisions. Like, for instance, there's a project that is going wrong, and there's a project that's going right. You get people from this project, and you put them on the project that's going wrong, because suddenly you're doing something. But then on the long term, the other project is going to struggle. And then in 2 months' time, you will get people from another project, and you will put them in this project. But then in 2 months' time, that project is going to struggle. And you keep moving people around, trying to, plug them into the holes of different projects, and hoping that at some given moment, all projects will go right, and you will have to move no one anymore. And you know how many times that had happened in the history of humankind? 0. 0.0 times. You are constantly moving people around. Because it's an immediate thing. If you have a customer complaining today, you have to fix that. Stop whatever you're doing, attend the customer, and you're like, well, I'm transporting plutonium to the nuclear station. Do you really want to? Yes, drop it. I'm like, do you want me to drop the plutonium? Yes, the customer is yelling. You don't see the future consequences of your decision. You see the actual pain of having a hot potato in your hands. Ow, 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 it burns, it burns, it burns. Everyone in your company is concerned with the short term, with the next delivery, with this project, this sprint, this iteration, this feature. You need at least one people out of every 20 trying to think how things are going to look like in 2018 and 2019. For me, that's the Scrum Master. So if you tie your Scrum Master to immediate outcomes, like the deliveries, like the deadlines, like the velocity right now, and the commitments and the contract, then he's not going to be able to think about how to have a better team in 2018. He's not going to be able to think how to have better product owners in 2018. He's not going to think about, shall we fix the way we are selling our contracts? Maybe we should, I don't know, review our business model. Instead of selling people, sell teams, complete teams. I have some consulting companies, outsourcing companies that are doing that. They say, no, you cannot buy like 3 developers and 1 tester. You can buy a team, and we configure the team. And you pay for the whole team. And there's a Scrum Master in the team, and when people are, what's the Scrum Master doing in the team? It's like, don't worry, that's not your problem. You're paying for the team, and you're paying for the results of the team. So you have to see how much money you are putting every month, and then you see the results. And then you create results-driven environments. And you have contracts that, instead of being defined by the number of features you're going to be delivering by a given date, are defined by which business metrics are we going to impact in the next 6 months. Like, for instance, we're going to work 6 months in improving your conversion rate, or we are going to work 6 months in increasing your scalability and the capacity of your system. And maybe you have a goal. We want 10% more capacity or 15% better conversion rate. And then we have like even bonuses if you are able to go beyond that goal. And if we work for some time and we don't reach that goal, there are mechanisms that we can see if this is a matter of bad practice from the customer, or we were working both together, we tried our best, and we didn't manage to improve the conversion rate. But now we've learned. And then we try something else, or we stop here and we are like, I'm not comfortable investing anymore in trying to increase the conversion rate of the website. We've been working together for 6 months, we can figure out what's the problem. Most of the time, when customer and developer are working together for 6 months into trying to tweak the conversion rate of a website, now they know a lot about what's the problem and why people are dropping off from the website, and they fixed a lot of things. And what they do after those 6 months is they see how much money they've expended and they see the results. Oh, maybe we didn't increase the conversion rate, but we fixed a lot of problems and we have a better operational margin and we have a better scalability in the platform and we fixed a lot of bugs and we have a more motivated team and we are attracting talent, and you're like, you know what? It was a good investment. It was good after all. The results were good. Maybe they were not the results we were expecting at the beginning, but I've been there every day. I was able to switch the metrics, the goals, the process, and we worked together. And in order to have this kind of collaboration between customer and developers, and I have customer and suppliers, and I have several companies that are working that way these days, you need people working for years in switching first the internal culture of the supplier and then the culture of the customers, because customers are still appearing in the door with a list of features. This is what I want. And at some given moment, we have to make customers understand that we don't want to be waiters anymore. We want to be doctors. A waiter is a person that will serve whatever you ask for. If your customer comes and says, I want fish and coffee, you will say, okay, and you will bring fish and coffee, and then your customer will have the fish, will put it inside of the coffee, will taste it and say, this tastes nasty, this is terrible, and you will say, ask for something else. But here's the bill, this is what you asked for. It's not working, but I deliver it before the deadline, under the budget, so we are fine. At some given moment, it will be nice that your customer appears saying, hello doctor, I want a prescription for fish. And you're like, you want what? A prescription for fish, sardines. You're like, why do you want a prescription for fish? Oh, because my knee hurts. You're like, and why on earth do you want sardines because your knee hurts? Oh, I don't know. I went online in the internet and I saw that sardines are rich in this kind of oils that are very good for the joints of the knee. So I figured out that if I eat a lot of sardines, I will feel better. And you're like, okay, I'm the doctor. Let me ask you some questions. Did you hurt your knee in the past days? Oh, now that you mentioned, yes, yesterday I was playing football and I had a nasty blow on my knee. Okay, maybe what you need is painkillers, anti-inflammatories, and some rest. Oh, I thought that, yeah, that was your mistake. You thought. You're not here to think. Tell me about your problem. Many times our customers, and that was in the previous presentation, they are knowledgeable in their domain. And their domain is their customer, their market, their problem. And as they know a lot about the problem, they believe that they know a lot about the solution, the best way to solve that problem. And that's not always true. Sometimes you have to go to someone that knows more than you about mobile application development and say, hey, this is what I want to achieve. This is my problem. And then the mobile application developer will say, I think there's a way we can help. I had this case in Spain, and I'm not going to use names, but there was this beer company that came to a mobile application developer and they say, okay, we want to have a mobile application. And they say, oh, nice, brilliant. It's a very well-known company. A mobile application for a beer company. And what do you want it for? What do you want the application to do? And the beer company said, oh, we don't know. You tell us. And you're like, well, what's the problem you are trying to solve with a mobile application? And they say, well, we are trying to solve the problem that we don't have a mobile application. And you know, everyone has a mobile application these days. So they were like, okay. And they deliver some kind of puzzle games with the logo of the company. Who uses that? Nobody. It was a huge failure. Maybe the project was done with Scrum, backlogs, Scrum Master's product owner, test integration, continuous delivery, test automation, continuous integration, continuous delivery, everything in the pack. It was an agile project. It was a stupid product. I think that my company, instead of being called Projectalis, should have been called Productalis, in the sense that we have to focus on the product and not in the project. And then one day I realized that even focusing on the product is a bad thing. Because, for instance, think about Kodak. Kodak had the best product in the world. They had the Kodak Color Gold photography film, 336 shots, 200 ASA, 100 ISO. That was the best film in the world. 87% of the sales in some given moment of life. And they were bankrupt because they fell in love with chemical film. And they started lagging behind digital photography, even though they invented digital photography. And one day in 2001, the managers of Kodak, they say, we are not going to play catch with the Japanese anymore. Famous last words. They basically don't exist anymore. They do batteries and a couple of other things. So instead of falling in love with your product, you should fall in love with your customer and the problem of your customer. You should think about the problem of someone that is taking one picture, click, and now has to wait 6 months until your niece baptism and to finish the film, and then to develop the film, only to find that the picture was fuzzy or moved, and oh crap, and you cannot take that picture anymore. And that's expensive and very inconvenient. And then digital photography solves that. You can make pictures and see them immediately and say, okay, or for instance, the Polaroid pictures. That was another way of solving the problem, but it was a better way to solve them with digital photography, even though at the beginning the quality was lower. But the customers, most of the customers, they didn't want chemical film quality for their family photos. Digital photography was good enough. Kodak fell in love with the product, instead of falling in love with the problem. So that's the moment where I say, instead of Projectalis or Productalis, I should name my company Problemalis. And I was like, no, that's a shitty name. So I'm not changing the name. Anyway, who's trying to figure out if we are in love with our business model and our product and our customers hate it? Who's taking time to see these kind of things? I think Scrum Masters and above Scrum Masters and company-wide Agile coaches, people working with the Scrum Masters to help them have better teams, but also working with the organization in having a more Agile organization. And that's the problem that these days we are calling agility at scale. That's something that will really bring better companies, better products, better results, more successful products. So for me, it's not about performing Scrum or doing Scrum by the book. It's about how do we get teams to get better? How do we teach teams to collaborate? How do we teach teams to communicate, share, learn from each other? How can we bring each individual in the team to their full potential? How do we have motivated individuals? How can we remove impediments for those teams? How can we have better process? How can we bring better tools? And if the Scrum Masters are too concerned, coding, this is a Scrum Master, a developer, I'm sorry, we are probably not talking about the same. If you are coding and you have to deliver something by Friday, do you think you have time to think about all this kind of stuff that I'm mentioning on the long term about creating a better company? And that's the framework or the mindset that I have for the Scrum Master. In order to close the talk, I want to thank you for using this model. Several people in the Agile world are starting to use this kind of small, condensed ideas of what's agility about. You have Joshua Kirievsky talking about modern Agile and has 4 dimensions and is very similar to this. You have Alistair Coburn talking about the Heart of Agile. And Alistair developed the Heart of Agile a little bit later than the Core of Agile, which was my idea. But Alistair is by far more famous than me. So yes, if you search for the Heart of Agile, Kokoro in Japanese, Alistair is starting to publish very, very interesting materials on how to use these 4 dimensions to figure out how to have a more agile company, a more agile team, a more agile project, instead of trying to figure out how to implement Scrum. I'm using Scrum in all my clients. It's an amazing tool. But if you focus on the tool, you might lose the sight of the problem we are trying to solve and the furniture we're trying to build, because you are too focused on the tool, which is the saw, the hammer, the screwdriver, whatever. So in this Heart of Agile or Core of Agility, you have early and continuous delivery of value, you have adapting to feedback constantly to your customer, and for me, those are things that the product owners should be very, very concerned about. And then you have creating high-performing teams and continuous improvement, and that's very, very clear responsibility of the product owner, of the Scrum Master, sorry. That doesn't mean that the Scrum Master is not working with the product owner in increasing velocity or having burn-down charts or producing information so the customer knows how the project is going. And that doesn't mean that the product owner is not learning how to write better user stories or learning how to create use cases or collaborating with the team so they have better understanding. So we are all doing everything. This is not like silos of responsibility. You do user stories, I do retrospectives. No, of course, we collaborate together. But at the end of the day, if something is not working, I would like to have someone who is responsible for following that. And delivering the project on time and having clear understanding of the four responsibility of the product owner is to have clear understanding. Everyone knows what we are building, what are we building it for, who are we building it for. So we are like, yes, now we understand. Maybe you do that by writing user stories. Okay, perfect. But maybe you do that by bringing the customer and making the customer talk to the developers, which is always a very good idea. Maybe the product owner is a facilitator between the customer and the team. And maybe he's like, I don't know how to write user stories, but I know how to make these people understand what are they trying to build, what problem are they trying to solve. And that's a product owner. And also to have clear priorities. This orgs at the gates problem that we were discussing. If you have 75 people asking for their stuff, we can work on 3 things this week, maybe, or 4, or 5, or 1. And the product owner should keep the priorities and make sure that this one thing that we are building this week is the most important, most valuable thing that we could do this week. And all the other things are also important, but if you work in 700 projects at the same time, you are not 700 times more productive. You are basically stalled. You're basically blocked. You're doing nothing. I go to banks and I ask for a census of the project portfolio, and I see 700 approved projects. And I'm like, how many projects did you finish last year? And they say 35. And I'm like, okay, so it's going to take like, I don't know, 20 years to finish this portfolio? And they're like, yeah, supposing that there's no new projects in the next 20 years. I'm like, it makes no sense. So sometimes someone needs to bring this common sense. And the product owner can do this kind of evangelizing. You are asking for too many things. We have to focus on a smaller set of requirements, features, productions, I don't know. But of course, the Scrum Masters are the one that should be working on a better culture, a culture that does not produce 700 projects at the same time. And then showing things to the customer, to the client, making tests, obtaining some metrics, doing some A/B testing, for instance, and creating a new website and seeing if the new website has actually a better conversion rate than the old website. And if it's not the case, then figuring out what was wrong. Because the important thing is learning and having successful projects, not just delivering the new website. We are creating a new website because what? Because we want a better conversion rate or we want a better user experience. Okay, how are we going to determine if the new website has better user experience? Oh, because the user experience expert says so. No, sorry. That's a problem. If you have a UX guy saying UX is what I say that UX is, no, user experience is user experience. So you have to measure and observe and adapt to what the users are experiencing, and that's adapting to change. So again, that's product owner. And if we don't have those tools, if we cannot do A/B testing because we don't have the tools, not for this project, for every project, then I would talk to the Scrum Master. Hey, how about we had A/B testing tools? If we don't have UX specialists, not for this project, for every project, not today, for the rest of our lives, there's nobody in the company that knows about user experience. This is not a problem of this project. This is not a problem of this sprint. This is a structural, systemic problem. And then I would talk to the Scrum Master. Hey, we should have a plan. So in 2018, we have people knowledgeable in user experience because that will increase the success of our products and that will improve our company. So it's a different situation to perform UX in this feature, in this user story for this iteration, or to improve the UX function in the company. So you have product owner for the short term, you have Scrum Master for the long term. That's the idea that I have of these two people working together in the 4 dimensions in order to bring better agility and in order to cover both the short term and the long term. If you put one person to do everything, that's something that the Scrum community has been saying for 20 years. Don't have one person doing both Scrum Master and Product Owner role, because most of the time he will end up doing one of those. And most of the time it would be the Product Owner role, because it's short-term deliveries, short-term goals, and short-term outcomes. And that's what you show to people, and that's what you get instant feedback. So when you have someone playing both roles, they usually end up favoring the product owner role. I think I'm on time, right? More or less. That was my talk.